Hello, my name is Josh Nadeau, and I'm with the Maine Small Business Development Center. I'm located at Northern Maine Development Commission in Caribou, Maine. I am going to be presenting a webinar today on starting your business in Maine. A lot of the clients that I meet with have questions about how to start a business in Maine, how to do it legally. They want to make sure they're not missing a step. So today I'm going to go over that process with you, and we'll try to tackle as much as I can in a short amount of time. So the first thing that I want to do is we're going to go through this PowerPoint slide, and as I'm going through it, there's going to be links that I'm going to show you and some other documents for items that we'll need to do when we meet, to help you to get started up. So, a couple of things we're going to cover. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? What kind of skills are necessary? What type of personality traits do people tend to have? Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. It takes a lot of integrity, willpower, perseverance. Small business financing, I would say approximately at least 75% of the people I meet with need some form of small business financing. So we're going to talk on that topic today. Legal structure is another. This will probably be a separate workshop at some point, but we're going to touch base on the different legal structures. When you start a business, you have to decide what type of structure the business is going to be. Where to go for licensing and safety, if there are any questions regarding that, and there's usually always licensing questions. Insurance requirements. I'm going to talk about some statistics for Maine small businesses. I'm going to go over a list of resource partners and their contact information. I'm not going to have all of them, but it's a broad network that we're associated with here. And lastly, I'm going to go over our startup checklist, which can be found on our website at www.mainesbdc.org. So the first thing I want to mention is, if anyone is thinking of doing a business because they think it's going to be easy, that is not the case. It's never easy. A lot of people come to me and they say, I got a good idea and I think this could make a lot of money, and there's just a long-term growth potential, and this is something I want to do. Now, that doesn't always mean that it's a good idea. If you find that it's your passion and you're willing to work long hours, very hard, and sacrifice some things. If you're willing to do that, you may be a good candidate to be an entrepreneur. So some of those things that I talked about: passion, persistence, good health and energy is one that people often overlook. Many times you'll have people who have health problems that are aging, and they want to do a physical job for the next 20 years. Well, that's going to be tough to do. We need to take into consideration everyone's health. Creativity, innovation, you always got to be able to think on your feet and change your mindset. Independence, self-reliance. So people that are entrepreneurs and starting their own businesses tend to be very self-reliant and independent. That's one of the reasons most people do this, is to be their own boss. Intuition, you got to have a good feel for situations, people, their emotions, their thoughts. Self-confidence, that's pretty self-explanatory. Market awareness, know your market. ability to, are you the type of person that wants to accept challenges, or would you rather have a steady job with very little instability? If you're the latter, you're not going to want to become an entrepreneur, because it can be very unstable at times. And lastly, solid work ethics. People that have solid work ethics are usually very successful because clients and customers see that. They can read that from you. This is just a short section that has some quotes that I thought were really interesting, and I wanted to kind of keep them on here because they're very true. One of the ones that I really like is one of the quotes from Thomas Edison, fourth from the bottom. I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. So that's exactly the mindset an entrepreneur has to have. So one of the first things I typically talk with people about when we do sit down and talk about starting up a business in Maine is a business plan. And I ask people if they have a business plan prepared. And if not, that's typically where we start. A business plan, which I have two definitions here, is a roadmap that provides direction so business can plan its future and avoid road bumps and potholes ahead of itself. The more formal definition is a statement of goals, reasons they're attainable, plans for reaching them. It also includes background information as well as financial information and projections. Many people think of business plans as a 20, 30, 40-page document that they need to prepare to provide to a lender, an investor, whoever it may be. That is not always the case, and there are different forms of business plans. And here at the Maine SBDC, we have a template that we use that is very user-friendly, and it's one that we use statewide, and would be glad to show it to you if you need any help. I would suggest reaching out to your Maine SBDC advisor in your area. And you can do that by going to Maine SBDC. So the first topic we usually talk about is a business plan. And many people aren't aware of what a business plan actually is. Essentially what it is it's a roadmap for your new startup or existing business that lays out what you're planning to do, how you're planning to get there. It includes projections, it includes narratives about how you think you're going to do these things, and it relays information to another party, whether it be a lender, an investor, a friend, another family member, in a timely format. So why do we talk about a business plan first? Well, there's really 5 main reasons that I see when people come to me and we need to talk about a business plan. So the first is to get a loan, raise capital. Most lenders, all lenders that I've dealt with, will not loan a commercial loan out unless you have a formal business plan in place, a written formal business plan with projections. Another reason the business plan is needed is because it helps to develop a game plan. So in your head, as you're beginning to start this business, you have an idea of how the business is going to run, how you're going to do things. But what happens is when you actually write the business plan out, it prompts you to think about things that you haven't thought about yet. And you'll say, oh, geez, I didn't think about this special license that I thought I didn't need. Or maybe I'm going to need extra capital and I need to increase my loan amount, my loan request with the bank. So writing the business plan actually helps shape the path your business is going to take, which leads into the next one. It helps to develop a path for your business. It also helps you avoid mistakes. So one thing I say is making mistakes on paper is a lot cheaper than making mistakes in the real world. And that's very true. That's another thing the business plan is really helpful at. Lastly, the business plan is used to attract investors. So if you find you want to attract investors and not seek a commercial loan or use your own personal funds, investors are going to want a very thorough business plan outlining the project. That's going to be their way of deciding whether they want to invest in your company or not. Along with the business plan comes financial projections, also known as a 12-month cash flow projection. Some banks require a 3-year cash flow projection. But without a doubt, this is the most important part of the business planning process. The cash flow helps to show that with the projected expenses you see and the projected income you're going to expect to realize, can the business support a loan and all of the debt and make money? In these projections, if someone were to take out a loan of $100,000, that would be amortized in the projection and it would be included in the expenses. So projections are really helpful at determining if a project can be financially successful. This is something that all the Maine SBDC advisors around the state do a lot of work on. One of the things that I tell people is if you cannot make the numbers work on paper, it's not going to work in the real world. So again, we'd rather make mistakes on paper than make mistakes in the real world. So we talked about a 12-month projection. Now I want to take a closer look at one. So I'm going to pull one up. I'm going to briefly go over it. I'm not going to go over it in too much detail because this is something that another course could be taught on easily. There's so much going on here. What I will say is this is an example of a 12-month cash flow projection. Make it a little bigger. And what it shows is 12 months at the top. So you project out 12 months from when you're going to start. So this is an older one where a business was going to close the loan in September and start in October. It's a convenience store. And you'll see here the revenue streams. Prepared food, pizza sales, cigarettes, coffee, beer, grocery, beverages other than beer. Down here, you'll see a list of all the expenses, both fixed and variable. And expenses come down here on the second page as well. As I scroll down some more, you'll see that there's a loan. So this client was going to be seeking a loan for $85,000 with a 15-year term at 6%, which is $717 a month. This payment gets brought up and factored into the cash flow above. So what this cash flow does is it tells us this bottom line here. This is what every lender, what every business advisor is concerned about. Is this line positive? does the cash position in the business checking account stay positive for 12 months out of the year? And does it increase? Does it decrease? Does it lose money? This is an example of a good cash flow projection. As the amount increases every month, and we're left with a positive figure after 12 months. In good cash flow projections, assumptions are included below the projection. Assumptions are ways that, assumptions show exactly how we got to each number above in the spreadsheet. So in this case, I built some formulas. Every box that has numbers in it is an actual formula. So we have our income assumptions. We have all of our expense assumptions down here. So when a lender or your business advisor looks at this, they can say, well, how did you come up with licensing? Well, licensing was a $210 liquor license fee for the year, and there was a food license for $150. So when we scroll up to licensing and the expenses, you see those two amounts right there. Let's look at another expense. For instance, cost of goods sold pizza. So cost of goods sold are the actual cost of the items that go into making the pizza. So on average, we figured it costs 27% to furnish the items to make a pizza. So I used the formula for 27%, and we included that up here. So this number is 27% of all pizza sales. Again, the assumptions explain how we did it. We got the figures by using pricing list from Dennis Paper. So cash flow projection is essential to any business plan. It's needed if you're going to seek financing, and I suggest everyone do it, whether you need financing or not, because it's an excellent exercise. More to come on cash flow projections in the future. So, will you need financing to start your business, and what are your options? So, obviously, there are your banks and your credit unions. One thing people aren't really aware of are the municipalities, so your cities or towns. Many of them have what's called RLF, revolving loan funds, and that's specifically for small businesses in their town. Typically, these are low interest loans, and the town is a second option. Economic development organizations, such as Northern Maine Development Commission, CEI, AVCOG, they also have funds that can be used for small business financing. The SBA, many people ask, how do I get SBA funds? You can't go directly to the SBA as they don't have a branch per se. But if you do want to take SBA funds out, commercial banks and many economic development organizations have funds from the SBA. So if that's something you're seeking, just ask wherever you're going. And then local investors. Many times people say, I'm out of options, the bank won't approve me, the town has no money, but I have this awesome idea. What do I do? Well, at that point, you look for investors. You can do local investors, or you can do something online like a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter campaign. So how do you apply for a small business loan, and what are the things that bankers or lenders are going to be looking at to judge your loan? So this is called the 8 C's of credit. You may see it in other places as the 6 C's of credit, the 5 C's of credit. I did the one with the 8 C's of credit because I like all 8 of these. But this is the exact criteria for what most lenders are going to use to decide whether they're going to give you a commercial loan or not. I'll go through them in the next slides briefly. So credit, most people are familiar with credit, but it just shows your ability to repay debt. So everyone's got a credit score from 300 to 850. And this is called the FICO score. If you see in these boxes, excellent is 750 and above, good is 660 to 749, fair is 620 to 659, and poor is below 619. One thing I will say regarding credit is if you have poor credit, I would still seek financing. I wouldn't stop your idea if you have a good idea. I know at the organization I work for, they have no minimum credit score. They do work with people with poor credit, as long as the poor credit is not delinquent at the time. So if we can prove that credit is poor because of a divorce 4 years ago and all the credit since then has been paid on time, credit is something that can be worked around. Excuse me. You can obtain one free annual credit report per year from annualcreditreport.com. There are other places you can go, but here you can actually get a free one. It does not give you the FICO score, the actual number, but it will show you what is on your credit report, what is satisfactory, what is delinquent, and how much. I recommend everybody do this. Capacity. Do I have the experience running a business? Have I had the business for more than a year? Do I know this industry well? Do I have a good team working for me? Is the business operating well? So capacity is a subjective view that the loan officer is going to have when they meet with you. And they're going to say, do I think you can actually do what you're saying you can do? Do you have the capacity to do this? And that's something that they're going to know over the course of meeting with you. Capital. So capital is financial assets, or the value of financial assets. Many times when lenders or counselors talk about capital, we're talking about cash. How much cash, aka capital, do you have to invest in this new business venture or this new project you're looking to do? Capital continued. So are you financially sound? What does your personal financial statement look like? You have a positive or negative net worth? How much existing debt do you have? How much money do you have to invest? Again, if any one of these is not satisfactory, that does not mean that we can't secure a loan. So I would continue pursuing a loan. A personal financial statement is a snapshot of your personal finances as of a certain date. So as of today, what do you have in your checking, savings? What do you have in retirement? What do you have in marketable securities, stocks, bonds, real estate, credit card debt, any other miscellaneous loans? And after we've figured out the equity in all of these items and the debt owed on it, what is your net worth? Is it positive? Is it negative? This is something all the lenders look at. Collateral. Now, this is what is used by the lender to secure their loan. And the reason that collateral is needed is an instance of Joe Schmo needs $20,000 to start his lawn care business. And with that $20,000, he's going to buy mostly pesticides, grass seed, just inventory with it. He's already got a lawnmower. So the pesticides and grass seed are not something the bank's going to want to use as collateral, because if the loan fails, the bank's not going to want to go try to collect the grass seed and collect the pesticides and sell that, because they're going to get cents on a dollar if they can sell it at all. So collateral is the financial assets that are pledged against the loan in case the loan fails. Many times, real estate is the number one piece of collateral. Automobiles are. To dig a little deeper into collateral, all asset values are discounted to determine loan values. And each bank does this a little differently, but this is an example. So let's say you have a $100,000 piece of real estate and you owe nothing on it. So you have $100,000 worth of equity. What the lender is going to do is they're going to finance approximately 80%. So they're going to say, we'll take your house as collateral and we'll finance you $80,000 towards your small business loan. They're going to look at your vehicles. This is one that varies between lender, but they're going to take the financial worth of your vehicle and potentially loan you 75%, usually 50 to 75% against your vehicle. New equipment, 75%, used equipment, 50%, CDs, certificates of deposit, 100%, because those are very secure assets. Accounts receivable, typically 0, because if you can't collect accounts receivable, what makes the bank think they can collect accounts receivable? And inventory. Inventory is a tough one. And many lenders do 0% on inventory. Some will do 25%. The reason for this is my example of shrimp versus hammers. So let's say you need $20,000 to buy inventory, and you're going to spend $20,000 to buy shrimp. Well, if the bank takes that as collateral and you don't end up selling the shrimp and you decide to move to a different state, that shrimp is going to be worthless in a matter of days because it's going to be rotten. Hammers, say you needed to buy $20,000 worth of hammers. Well, this is actually a hard tangible asset that is not going to go bad. So most banks would be okay with lending you 25% on whatever the value is of the hammers. So you have to take into account what the inventory is and its useful lifespan. Character. This is another subjective measure. The loan officer is going to sit with you and they're going to say, do I think this person's telling me the truth? Do they have the energy and enthusiasm to follow through with this? And is this someone that we want to finance? Other questions? Do you have a good reputation? Do you go-getter? Do you shy away from confrontation and controversy? Are you easily frustrated? One thing I'll mention that I've seen in the past is there's typically a decent amount of paperwork that needs to be done. Most small business owners are extremely busy. And because of this, they don't have a lot of time to do other things, such as fill paperwork out. So a lot of times I see people get frustrated and say, I don't have time to fill that out. I don't want to fill out the personal financial statement. Well, it's too much information. It's too much work. I don't have the time. When that happens, that's a red flag for a lender. Because if you don't want to follow through with what's needed before they give the loan, you're probably not going to want to listen and follow through with what's needed once you've got the loan. So just so you know, that's a big red flag that stands in the way sometimes of financing. Conditions. This is what are the market conditions surrounding your business or your new business? Are you setting up a restaurant where there's 5 restaurants right next to you in a town of 5,000 people? Because if that's the case, the conditions are poor. Or are you offering a new unique service that's nowhere even remotely close to where you are? Commitment, self-explanatory. This is another subjective measure of how much the loan officer thinks you're committed to this project. And cash flow, the last one, which we've already talked about. Does the business cash flow? Is it positive? Are there any months that go negative? If so, why? The cash flow is one of the more important C's of the credit. Without a positive cash flow, it's going to be impossible to secure a loan. So here are some required documents that are used to apply and secure a loan. So business plan, which we talked about, with sources and uses. So sources and uses are the different sources where you're looking to get money from, and what are you using that money for? Is it for renovations? And how much money is it going to cost? $20,000 in renovations? Is it to purchase new equipment? A tractor? That's $35,000. So a business plan with what you need the money for, where you plan on getting it from, and how much it's going to be. A 12 or 24-month cash flow analysis or projection. Purchase and sale agreement. If you're purchasing an existing business, you're going to need a signed purchases and sale agreement. If it's a startup business, you obviously don't need a purchase and sale agreement. One thing I always recommend is that the purchase and sale agreement, somewhere in it says subject to financing, subject to appraisal if needed. So that way, if an appraisal doesn't come back the way you like it, you can back out of the purchase and sale agreement. And if the financing for some reason doesn't come through, you're not held liable to still buy this property. Personal financial statement, which I mentioned before, it's a snapshot of your personal finances as of a certain date, and we look to see what your net worth is. Schedule of liabilities, very similar to personal financial statement, except this is all of the debts you have listed out, when you took out the debt, when the debt's going to mature, what's the interest rate on the debt, what's your payment per month, what's the term, what's your collateral. So this is something the lenders look at as well. 3 years federal tax returns are usually required by any lender. profit and loss statements if you're looking to purchase an existing business. When people come to me and they say, I want to purchase the business down the street, the first thing I request are get the last 3 years tax returns and get the last 24 months of monthly profit and loss statements. With those items, we can sit down together and we can analyze, is this a profitable business? Is this business trending up? Is it trending down? There's a lot of things we can determine with those statements. A balance sheet just shows what you have for assets and liabilities and items like that. Credit report, that's something that'll be done by a lender. Another thing to think about is life insurance. I know here at Northern Maine Development Commission, we have a policy in place where if the loan is above $10,000, you need life insurance in the amount of the loan for at least as long as the loan. And it needs to be what's called assignable. So Northern Maine Development can take an assignment of the policy. So for instance, if you want a $50,000 loan from us and you have no life insurance, we're going to request that you go out there and get a policy for $50,000. If the loan length for the term is 10 years, we're going to require at least a 10-year, $50,000 life insurance policy. That's something that can take weeks to months sometimes. So if you know you're seeking commercial financing and it's going to be a larger amount, you're going to want to start shopping for life insurance ahead of time. You don't pay anything until you actually sign on the policy dotted line. Some basic questions every lender is going to ask you. How much money do you want? How much do you have invested, or are you willing to invest in this business? How's this loan going to be used? How long do you need to repay the loan? How will the loan be repaid? And what collateral do you have to offer? So these are all very important questions, and the way you answer them is very imperative to your success with securing a loan. So before meeting with the lender, these are some things you're going to want to do. First, find out which lender you want to approach. Find out the rules that they have for their business loans. Make sure the lender actually has loans that fit what you're looking for. Some lenders only do really small loans, and maybe you need a large loan. So research that ahead of time. Ask for a loan application. Make an appointment in the future. Rehearse the presentation that you're going to have with your business plan, which is prepared, and your cash flow projection. And just remember, the lender is like a customer. So you have to convince them that what you're saying has merit and truth to it. Also going to want to understand the rules of the game before you start, and try to find out what makes your lender comfortable or uncomfortable. So for instance, if you have a lender who is a financial person, which most lenders are since they're in lending money, don't go to the lender with no cash flow projections or financial statements. Say, here's my business plan, because that's not going to go anywhere. An example I have is below. Don't go to a lender who has been an accountant for most of their life and then submit a business plan with subpar financial projections. Or one that has been in sales their whole life and you lightly cover your competitors and strategies within your business plan. So you need to know your lender's hot buttons. What are they really passionate about? Shifting gears from financing. This is something that's always discussed when people come to see me to start a business. And one thing I have to say before I get into this is I am not a lawyer and I am not approved to give legal advice. But I do talk about the different structures and business entities with my clients. Now, there's essentially 5 different types of legal structures. And I have a lot of information in the following slides, but I'm going to go over it a little more quickly because you can go back to the slides and read them all. But first, we have a sole proprietorship. So this is a business that's owned by one person. The person is solely responsible for the risk. So there are more proprietorships than any other type of business out there. Some of the pros: you can quickly get in business. There's very few restrictions compared to other forms of business entities. You're the boss. You make all the calls. There's less government control and taxation. There's less record keeping that needs to happen, although you do need to keep good records. And you don't have to do a separate tax return. You can file one tax return. Some cons: you are the boss of yourself, but you're also the only one responsible for anything that happens. If there's a death or impairment, the business usually dies with the person or stops with the person. It's typically more difficult for sole proprietors to raise cash, and a proprietorship appears less professional than a corporation or LLC. Another form of business entity is a general partnership. Now, this is extremely similar to a proprietorship in most ways, except for it involves more than one owner. Some pros of the partnership are shared costs of startup, shared responsibilities and work, shared risk and expenses. You also get the complementary skills of each other. One may be good at one thing and the other may be good at the other, which makes your business a stronger business with 2 people. Mutual support, motivation, and pass-through taxation. So the profits from the business pass through to the owner's personal tax returns. So there's no separate filing. Just like a proprietorship, it's passed on to your personal tax returns, the income from the business. Some cons: partnership in general, partners in a general partnership are jointly and individually liable for business activities of the other. So if your partner decides to move across the country and nobody can get a hold of him, nobody can find him, you will be liable for all the debts, not just half of them, because you have a partner. You're still responsible for 100% of it. You have to share your profits, and you don't have total control over the business. Another thing that I see happen a lot is many people go into business with family and or close friends. I put a quote down here: "A friendship founded on business is a good deal better than a business founded on friendship." So what that's saying is, if you have a really good friend and you go into business with him, it could potentially ruin that relationship forever. But if you go into business and make a friend out of it, that's different. You don't want to go into business with someone that you've been friends with for 30 years. And maybe there's a situation where you do want to do that. When there is a partnership, I suggest everyone do a partnership agreement. And it's basically a document that establishes the terms of the partnership, who owns what percentage, what ways, if each partner wants to, or one partner wants to leave, how is that going to work? Here's an example, a very basic one. Next is a limited liability company, also known as an LLC. So this is a third business entity we're going to talk about. An LLC is one in which the members, owners, have a liability limited to their investment in the entity. It allows for structural flexibility in planning distributions and allocations. All members of an LLC can participate in the management without risking loss of liability protection. So in a sole proprietorship, you are the business. So there's you and Josh's greenhouse. That's one entity. In a limited liability company, there's you or me, Josh, and Josh's greenhouse, and we're separate entities. There's two things that come into play with that, and that is liability and taxes, essentially. So an LLC, you're only limited to the liability of the company. So I use an example of a slip and fall. So let's say someone comes into my greenhouse and I left water at the doorstep and they slipped, fell, broke their arm, got an infection, had to go to the hospital for months on end. And they sued the business. Well, if I'm a sole proprietorship, as you remember, I'm one entity with the business. So if they sue the business, they're suing Josh Nadeau. As a limited liability company, that same situation happens. They're suing the limited liability company, but they're not suing Josh Nadeau. Now, there's always different instances where they could still sue the limited liability company and Josh Nadeau if I were the one that was found to be negligent. Maybe it was my employee that did this. Not me. Limited liability company provides additional protections. So some of the pros of being an LLC are more flexibility. You can be much more flexible with a management structure than a corporation if you're a limited liability company, which we'll get into. We've talked about the personal liability. So you're only limited to the liability in the company. You're free of personal liability. Taxes. So an LLC can choose multiple ways to be taxed. It can be taxed as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, an S corporation, or corporation. So that benefit right there is a big one. There's fewer compliance issues. In most states, an LLC doesn't need to have an annual meeting, and the LLC isn't required to have a board of directors. Plus, there's less paperwork and record keeping required. Unlike a sole proprietorship, if the sole proprietor passes away, if the owner or one of the members of the LLC passes away, the LLC the LLC's life will continue. In formation, you can form an LLC with as little as one person, but you could also have an unlimited amount of members. Cons of being an LLC: if you're not an active owner in the business, you cannot take a wage, and instead must take a percentage of profit at the end of the year or a draw. LLCs have a startup fee. In the state of Maine, it's $175. If you want to fill out an application, you can contact one of your business advisors and they can show you how to get to that application. From there, you may seek legal advice, or you can choose to do this yourself. I believe every year to renew the application, it's $80. Investors are more likely to invest in a corporation. Therefore, it's generally a little bit harder to raise capital in an LLC. And unless you're running this LLC alone, the ownership is spread across the members. So you have less control. Now, corporation, this is the fourth entity we're going to talk about. And there's two separate types of corporations that are common. There's what's called a C corporation or a C corp, or an S corporation, S corp. In general, a corporation is a separate legal entity in the eyes of the Internal Revenue Service and is taxed at corporate rates, which are different from individual rates. C corporation has a double taxation effect, one at the corporate level and then one at the individual level upon distribution of dividends. So as a corporation, it's structured somewhat similar to an LLC where you and the business are separate entities. The double taxation effect comes into play when the corporation is actually taxed on the profits itself. And then when dividends or payment is made to the shareholders, that is taxed as well. So that's the double taxation that takes place. Now that's something that many people don't like and have a problem with. Because of that, there is a different form of corporation, which is called the S corporation. And it allows for less taxation. There's not a double taxation effect. I'm not going to get into the specifics now, as this is probably going to be another workshop that we'll talk about in the future. But know that there's a C corp and there's an S corp. So owners are separate from legal liability, so they're not entirely responsible for issues that they're facing. They have the ability to sell stock if you're in a corporation, which raises the likelihood of acquiring financial capital. So you'll see a lot of the major corporations that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. That's how they raise capital, is by being on that exchange and selling stock. A corporation looks more professional to people when you have the name Josh Nadeau's Greenhouse Corporation or Corp, or Josh Nadeau's Greenhouse Incorporated. It sounds more professional. And many times employees have options to buy stock at a fixed price and receive stock benefits that typical people on the street don't receive if they were to buy that same stock. Some of the cons: it's very timely and costly to start up a corporation. There's filing fees that need to be paid to the Maine Secretary of State. All corporations are required by law to observe a number of corporate formalities to ensure the corporation is operating as a separate entity, independent of the business owners. Some of these steps involve holding regular meetings of directors, keeping records of corporate activity, and maintaining corporation's ongoing financial independence. So there's a lot more record keeping and paperwork involved. We've already talked about the double taxation effect that C corporations face. That's another con. Another question that I'm asked many times is, what do I need for licenses? I'm starting up a restaurant and I know I need something from food inspector, but I don't know where to go. Well, what we do is we use this program that's sponsored and run by DECD, which is Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And they put together a special program called Maine Business Answers. And I'm going to click on it, but here's the link, which is in the PowerPoint. So maine.gov/business answers. And it should bring you to this page, which redirects you to this page. When you get here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to click Start a Business in Maine. And then it's going to have a drop down. You're going to click on the drop down, and there's going to be a list of a bunch of different types of businesses and industries. So what you're going to want to do is find the business that you're looking to get into. And maybe there's 3 or 4 things. Maybe there's, I want to start a restaurant. Maybe I'm doing a bar as well. Or maybe I'm doing a dance club with it. So you're going to want to look up restaurant, you're going to look up bar, you're going to want to look up dance club, anything that may be applicable. So I'm going to go through one just to show you how this works. We'll go through, we'll say we're going to start a restaurant. So we're going to scroll down. And we are going to find restaurant right there. So what it's going to do now is it's going to prompt you some questions. And based on how you answer those questions, it's going to prompt you additional questions. So we just need to follow the questions at this point. So will your business sell prepackaged foods? We'll say yes. Next question. Will prepackaged foods be greater than 50% of the business? Most restaurants, likely not. Is your building on town city water? Again, answer this however it needs to be answered when you go through it. Most restaurants are probably likely on town city water and sewer, so I selected yes. Will you sell alcohol? We'll do yes for this example. Will consumption be on premise? Yes. Will your business sell seafood? Yes. Will your business have a dance floor? Yes. Now I'm selecting yes to a lot of these to show you at the end why, what it's going to do. Will your business sell freshwater fish? We'll say no to this one. Will I have a gift shop in a separate building? No. Okay. So once you're done going through all of the questions and prompts, it's going to bring you to this page, which is going to show you all of the licenses and permits that you need to look into based on the questions that you answered. So this website and this tool is fantastic. It makes finding the licensing and regulations a lot easier than it used to be. So retail or resale certificate, eating and lodging license through the Department of Health and Human Services. It's got the phone number, it's got a website you can click on. I would suggest calling the phone number on each one of these, because when you go to the website, it can be confusing sometimes. But know that you're going to have to call this department at this phone number. You're going to have to call the Bureau of Alcoholic and Beverages and Lottery Operations at this number, etc., etc. So Business Answers is where you're going to want to go for licensing. It's an extremely helpful tool. Code enforcement. Many people don't necessarily think of this, but you need to check with your local code enforcement officer and see if the location you're looking to do business out of is zoned correctly. Many times people want to do a small business in a residential zone, and that can become a problem. I've seen someone try to do a veterinary service out of their house, and before you knew it, they ended up having 100 dogs in a very residential neighborhood, and it became an issue, it became a problem. So you want to check that ahead of time before it becomes a problem. You can find the code enforcement officer at your local city office, town office. Safety. If you have any questions regarding safety, there's a very neat program out there, and it's called Maine Safety Works. It's through the Department of Labor, and what they'll do is they'll actually come and meet with you, and they'll do an analysis of things that they see that could potentially be dangerous, hazardous, violations, stuff like that. What a lot of people say is, well, I don't want OSHA coming and fining me, you know. This is not OSHA, and they're not coming to fine you. They're coming to make you aware of these things, you know, and they will follow up with you. And if you don't do these, you know, the things that they mention, you know, then you might meet some resistance. But these people are here to help new businesses get in business and be safe. They're not there to fine or get people caught. More about Safety Works right here. Do I need to register my business? So this question is a common question. Now, depending on your legal entity, whatever you decide is going to determine how you're going to do this. If you're a sole proprietorship or partnership, you must register with the city or town you're doing business in. You don't need to register with the state of Maine. So you're going to go to your town office, say, I want to start a business, and they'll have you fill out an application, and they will likely have a small fee. It varies from town to town. When I say small fee, I've seen as small as $20 to as much as $50. I'm sure it's larger in the more populated areas in Maine. Same with a partnership. You got to register with the city or town. An LLC or corporation, if you decided to become these business entities, you are going to actually file with the state of Maine. So I would still suggest going to the city or town and registering your business, though, so they know that your business is there and that you exist in case someone comes in wanting what you offer. How do I know if my business name is already taken? So there is a program out there, which I've listed here, and we'll click on it just like we did on the last one. And It's put on by the Maine Bureau of Corporations, Elections, and Commissions. And it's going to bring you to this page, the link that I provided. What you're going to want to do is click on Corporate Search. And then you're going to want to come here and you're going to want to put any type of word that may be in your business. What you really should do is put your business. So let's say Josh's Greenhouse. I don't want someone to have that name. Good. Nobody has it. So another way you could search is Josh's. So there's a Josh Smith Industries out there in Maine somewhere. Or just Josh. And that brings up a lot more. So what you have to do is your due diligence and look down here and make sure you don't see any businesses with the same business name that you're looking to have. I don't see anything that says Josh's Greenhouses. What I'll probably do is do greenhouses now. And I'll go through this and I'll make sure there's nothing in here as well. It's going to list them all. Nothing matches. So if you don't see anything here and you've tried all you can here and you've also Googled to see if there's any business that exists in the state of Maine with the same name you want, you've done your due diligence and you are allowed to name the business. One thing I will say is if you are a limited liability company, you are going to have to include LLC or the words limited liability company in the business name. And if you're a corporation, you're going to have the words corp, corporation, Inc., INC, to let people know you're an actual corporation. What's an FEIN or an EIN number? And do I need one? The short answer is you don't necessarily need one, but I recommend everyone do this and get one. So if you're sole proprietorship, you can use your social security number as your EIN. Your EIN is your employer identification number. It's how the IRS is going to recognize your business. They're not going to recognize the business as Josh's Greenhouses. They're going to recognize it as 5473745, the number they give me. If I had to say that number again, I couldn't come up with it. If you decide to be an LLC or a corporation, you have to do an FEIN or EIN, which is the same thing. It's just one is a federal employer identification number. The other just stands for employer identification number. So you don't have the option if you're an LLC or a corporation. You must apply for this first. I tell sole proprietors, do this anyways because you don't want to have your social security number out there any more than you have to. And if it's going to be the identity of your business, it's just not something that's the smartest move, I would say. Taxes. Taxes can get complicated. This will likely be another workshop that we're going to do at some point. There's 4 basic taxes that you're going to have to be worried about. Not all taxes are applicable. Different situations will require different taxes. Briefly, if you have employees, you're going to have what's called the payroll tax. It's tax imposed on an employee that is usually calculated as a percentage of their salary. So the employer is going to withhold the taxes from their paycheck, and it's basically Social Security and Medicare for your employees is what it's going to go to. Sales tax, which is most everyone is familiar with. Sales tax in the state of Maine right now is 5.5% of any goods or in some services, actually. Most services don't have sales tax, but there are some that do. This tax needs to be collected when items are sold and then needs to be repaid back to the state government on a monthly or quarterly basis. Sales tax does differ on different items. It's 8% on food items, and it's 10% on short-term auto rentals. Next is income tax. Income tax is a tax charged by the government, and it is basically on the money that you have made, the business has made. So this is the single biggest revenue source of money for the federal government, are income taxes. Self-employment tax, which is one that most people aren't familiar with, didn't know existed. This is essentially paying in for Social Security and Medicare for yourself in the future. So it's 15.3% of total net income paid quarterly or annually. 12.4% is for Social Security, 2.9% is for Medicare. Insurance. So there is insurance for pretty much anything and everything out there. Anyone who goes into business is going to want to get a commercial insurance policy that covers the property that you have, such as, in the case of the greenhouses, the actual plants, the actual equipment that I have to move the plants around, the greenhouses themselves, and then the liability, which is going to protect me and the business from any liability claims, like a slip and fall claim that I mentioned before. There's different types of insurance. I'll go through them briefly. So the big one that you want to be worried about when you're opening a business is you need to make sure you have general liability insurance, which covers you in the case that someone falls and tries to sue your business for the fall. There's products liability insurance. So if you are a company that manufactures something, let's say you manufacture toothpicks. Well, if you don't get products liability insurance and someone somehow chokes on a toothpick and dies, your company could easily be sued and you'd be at fault, could be at fault. Professional liability insurance. So these insurances are mainly for physicians. There are other entities that want it. It's also known as errors and omissions insurance. It protects these people against malpractice, errors, and negligence. There's many cases of this in the news when surgery should have been done on one leg and it was done on the other. That's why professional liability insurance is needed if you're in, definitely in the medical field. Property insurance, you want to cover the property that you have on premise in case of a fire or vandalism. Home-based insurance, a lot of people aren't familiar with this. So if you're looking to do business out of your home and set up an office in your home, many people think, well, I'm covered because I have a homeowner's policy that this should all be covered under. What happens is if something actually happened to the office within your house and insurance did an inspection after a claim and found that, hey, they were operating this as an office, they had people in and out of here, there was a much higher risk of a loss because of that, they can deny your claim. So you need to call your insurance company and let them know you're looking to do, move your business in your house, and you need to seek home-based business insurance, which is typically not a lot, but it does increase your premium. Workers' compensation. So if you have employees, you're going to have to get workers' compensation. It's an insurance purchased by employers for the coverage of employment-related injuries and illnesses. Health insurance. A lot of self-employed individuals ask me, what do I do for health insurance? And my first remark to them is, you have a spouse or a significant other that has health insurance that you can get on their policy. Because if you can, that's likely the most feasible and best way to do it. You also could go to healthcare.gov, which I have listed here, and search the marketplace, which is what it's known as. And you can find policies there for people who don't have insurance coverage through an employer or some other form of insurance coverage. As of January 1st, 2019, there is no tax penalty for not having health insurance. Prior to that, there was a significant tax penalty. So that is a fairly new change in the rules. I've listed some small business statistics in Maine. Some of these are recent, some of them are a little bit older. A few of the ones that I like to mention are, especially this one at the bottom, 56.9% of Maine's workforce are small business employees. So over half the people in the workforce in Maine work for a small business. That's significant. I'll go to the bottom again. Small business accounts for 99.3% of the employers in the state. So that makes the other statistic look insignificant, but that's a large amount. So most businesses in the state are small businesses. Now, what the SBA, or Small Business Administration, coins small business as are any business that has 500 or fewer employees. So most people in the state of Maine will say, well, geez, no one's got 500 more employees other than Walmart and Target and those big chain stores. Well, it's true. But this goes to show that 99.3% of all the employers in the state are small business. So very interesting statistic. Another one, according to Forbes magazine, nationwide, more businesses shut down each month than are started. In Maine, however, more businesses are founded monthly than shut down. So it's a very positive trend. Here's a list of some resources I put together. Some may be useful to you, some may not. But there are people you can turn to when you want to potentially start a business, you want to get financing, you want to seek advice. What I would tell you is definitely reach out to the Small Business Development Center and the advisor in your area. I believe I mentioned it once, but if you're not sure who the advisor is, you can always go to mainespdc.org and click on the button Request Advising, which will get sent to our main office, and an advisor will be in touch very shortly with you. And we'll set up a one-on-one meeting, and everything is free and confidential, so there's no cost. If there's other resources you want to seek out, there are the local economic development officials, which many cities and towns have in Maine. A lot of the smaller towns don't have that, but sometimes there are countywide officials as well. So I would tell you to go to the town office and see if there's an economic development director there. Nonprofit organizations such as Northern Maine Development, Coastal Enterprises, AVCOG, they have a number of different resources, not just directly dealing with small businesses, but other resources such as financing departments, planning departments, other programs that could be applicable to you. The Small Business Development Center, as I mentioned, I should have put that first, but I didn't. There's the phone number to our Portland office if you want to find an advisor and set up an appointment. SCORE. SCORE is a branch of the SBA, just like the SBDC is a branch of the SBA. SCORE, it used to stand for Senior Corps of Retired Executives. It's not just retired executives anymore. And what it is a bunch of different people with many different industry backgrounds who are willing to offer their time and services to advise people on industry-specific items. So, if someone comes into me and they want to do aquaculture, it's not something that's typical for me to deal with. So what I would do is probably have them reach out to SCORE and see if they can talk to someone there first and go from there. Women's Business Center, partnering organization of the SBDC. We work very closely with them. They're a great organization. They are also a branch of the SBA, like SBDC and SCORE. They are based out of, I believe it's Portland, but their website is below, ceimaine.org/women, and their phone number as well. They do not only work with women nowadays, they do work with men, but they were formed to work with women entrepreneurs. New Ventures Maine, they were formerly known as Women Working Community. They have offices throughout the state, and they have people who can help with financial planning, personal financial planning, starting a business. I work a lot with the New Ventures representative up here in Aroostook County, and we both work with businesses, but we do different things. So I'd recommend seeing them if you want a second opinion. The Small Business Administration, which everyone's well aware of, it's the branch of the government that deals with small business. We have our SBA office in Augusta. I've put the link to their website and their phone number. And, if you ever had any questions directly for the SBA. FAME, we work with FAME. They're Finance Authority Maine. They're essentially known for some of the money and grants that they have for small businesses. MITC, MITC, Maine International Trade Center is what it stands for. So anyone that's looking to do business internationally, whether you're exporting or importing, this is a great institution that will help you and actually send you personalized report on what you need to do, how to do it, and any regulations you'd be facing and repercussions and all of those things. So recommend them for anything with international commerce. Maine MEP. MEP stands for Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and they work with people that are in the manufacturing sector. So if you're looking to do something, make something, I would recommend calling them. Maine PTAC, that program is another good program. It stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center. There's a few representatives around the state that work in that program, and what they do is they work in government contracting, and they help small businesses get set up with SAM, which is the Systems for Award Management, where all the contracts come out from the state and federal government, and they get you signed up, and they get proposals sent to you directly so you can actually bid on them. Only people that are set up in SAM can bid on government proposals. So it's a very good program because most businesses don't do this. There's a lot of jobs that come up. What I would suggest is calling the director down there, Ken Block. I believe he's out of Bangor, and he can get you to the right PTAC counselor in your area. Maine Technology Institute, they are a good partner of ours, and they look to work with people who are trying to do something new, innovative, a new process, a new procedure, a new product. So if you ever have anything like that, they can help you sort of take your product from idea to fruition, really, over a period of time. USDA Rural Development, they are a very good partner of ours. We have loan funds that they actually administer here for us, but they are very helpful, and they have grant programs such as the REAP grant, REAP, and they also have some loan programs as well. DECD, I mentioned them before, Department of Economic Community Development out of Augusta, very helpful with their Maine Business Answers website. They also offer a host of other things, small business related. Tourism, if you're in the tourism industry, Maine Office of Tourism, I would suggest visiting them and go to visitmaine.com. Their number is listed there and their website as well. And then some other resources that are not specific are, lawyers, accountants, and bankers. So I would suggest every small business owner have a good lawyer, a good accountant, and a good banker. What I'd like to do now is go over the startup checklist, which is something we have on our website at mainespdc.org. And what it is a very generic checklist for starting any new business in the state of Maine. So I kind of want to go through it with you. And some of these things would be applicable to a new business that you'd be starting. Some of these won't be. But what I would suggest is going over this, doing some of this research ahead of time that you can do, setting up an appointment with a business advisor in your area, and then we could go over this in person and get real specific on what needs to be done. Initially, prepare a written business plan with pro forma financial statements, aka cash flow projections. So we've talked about those things. Choose a business entity. Talked about that. So sole proprietor, partnership, LLC, or a form of corporation. There's some information here if you want to incorporate or form an LLC. There's a link and there's a phone number. There's also information and a link about trademarking or service marking if you decide you wish to protect the name of the business that you have and you're not incorporated. So this, you'd go through the Secretary of State's office, and there's an application at this link here and directions for doing that to protect your name. If your business is going to operate under a different name than your given name, so my business would be Josh's Greenhouses, so that would be a different name than my real name, Josh Nadeau. So I'd have to file a DBA, doing business as. And again, there's usually a small fee with the city or town you do business with. But that is the step that must be taken. Next, business answers. We went over that. So this is where you would check for any licenses or permits. Now, you can use their online portal that we used, or if you have one of those businesses that's kind of not a common business, you may not find it. So I would suggest calling the number here and speaking with someone there. Check to make sure local zoning ordinances are, or you're within zoning ordinances. We've mentioned that. FEIN, EIN. We've also mentioned that. This just shows where you're going to go to do it. So you're going to want to go to irs.gov. It takes a few minutes and you get your EIN number right on the spot. It's free. Register for Maine state income tax withholding and unemployment insurance. You're going to want to do that. You have to do that. So you're going to have to file an application, which there's two different ways you can do that. There's a paper version and then there's an online version. So I would suggest going here, maine.gov/labor, and doing the online portion. Because when you get the paper portion, it lists every tax available in the state. And there's more than even I thought. So you're going to go through that paper application and say, I don't know if I need to do this or not. Or when you do the website, it prompts you questions. So it guides you through. So you do the things you need to do and you don't worry about the extra. These next 4 things are for employees. So if you're going to have employees, you got to have everyone fill out a W-4 and an I-9. The W-4 for tax withholding and the I-9 to make sure of U.S. citizenship. There's a link here to get those forms. You can print them right off. Reminds you, you're going to have to get workers' comp insurance, which we've mentioned already, if you have employees. And here's one most people aren't aware of, but if you hire a new person or terminate them, you need to let Maine DHHS know within 7 days. And you can submit the report right here to the link or call the number. Many people ask, why is this? One of the reasons I was told is that if someone has back child support of thousands of dollars and the state needs to know of their, of that, they'll garnish their wages. So that's the reason for that. Obtain and post required labor posters. Many of you have probably seen these. They're the big posters that are usually in the common space at your place of work. If you don't want to call and see if they'll send you one, you can try to download all those labor laws separately, and they're right here. If you're going to be selling a taxable product or service, and not every business is going to be, most businesses will be, you need to obtain a state sales tax number. So you're going to do this by filing an application for tax registration, which can be found at maine.gov/revenue. It'll actually bring you to the same website, or the same application is up here. And one thing I want to note is this number is wrong, needs to be updated. It's 5644, and you'll see up above here it says 207-624-5644. This is the correct number. When it comes time to filling out applications for taxes, I recommend finding the application and then calling someone and having them walk you through the process, because these applications can get tricky. Now, if you're retailing something and you're selling an item, you're going to want to get a resale certificate. And what a resale certificate does is, if you're, let's use my example, for instance, if I have Josh's greenhouses and I want to buy a bunch of seeds, to plant some things to sell for spring, then I would show the wholesaler my resale certificate, and the wholesaler would not charge me tax as a business owner on those seeds. When I sell those seeds would then have the 5.5% tax on it, which I would collect to send back into the state of Maine. So a resale certificate helps you avoid paying tax when you're reselling an item. Now, this is something that will be in the application up here. It's going to ask you a question. Do you expect to sell $3,000 or more in gross sales over the next year? If you select yes, it will give you and print you out a resale certificate. Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA. So if you do have questions and you want to call OSHA, there's the phone number. Many people are skeptical of OSHA, but they are there to help you out. There's also Maine Safety Works that we talked about. Lastly, there's just a reminder to get the necessary insurance coverage that your business is going to require. We went over that. So this is the startup checklist, which again is a generic checklist for any new business starting up in Maine. And I recommend you look at it, you print it out, you look at it, and you make notes, you set up an appointment with one of your business advisors, and we go over it with you in person to see which ones you actually need to do and talk about them further. And that's going to do it for the presentation on starting a business in Maine. And I really thank you for your time. If you have any questions, reach out to an advisor. I've mentioned it multiple times, but go to mainespdc.org and hit request advising. We'd be glad to help you. We love helping new businesses and seeing economic development and creating jobs. So we hope to hear from you, and I thank you for your time.